The New England Patriots came out of free agency with momentum and a clear focus on adding pieces that fit both the culture and foundation Mike Vrabel is building to the roster in Foxborough. After reaching Super Bowl 60 with a 17-win season, a perfect 9-0 record on the road, and one of the more impressive turnarounds in recent NFL memory, our focus now shifts toward the future. But is New England better positioned today than they were when the clock struck zero on the 2025 NFL season? Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Patriots Roundtable Podcast. Alongside Tyler Geis, I'm Eddie Murata, and today we're going to be diving deeper into where the Patriots roster stands post-free agency and pre-NFL draft. Where did they get better? Where is there still room for improvement? And how might that affect their strategy come draft night? We're going to be diving into all of those topics here today. But first, Tyler, it's great to be back on here with you. Another fun mock draft last week. We're talking a little bit more free agency and some draft preview here tonight. How have things been and what are we looking forward to here in this episode this evening?
I think we're looking forward to just kind of analyzing what we have so far, what the Patriots have done so far. They've made a lot of pretty impressive moves, a lot of one-for-one acquisitions in free agency, a lot of buzz leading up to the draft. Those past two mock drafts had done very well for this show. I feel like we're I feel like you and I have officially carved out our little corner of the internet the last couple weeks. A lot of people leaving comments, by the way, some of us completely agreeing with what we're saying. A lot of people absolutely giving us slander, but even some of the slander seems nice and respectful. So thank you, everybody, for not being too harsh on us. And subscribers have been going up on the show as well. So I just want to, tip my hat to all of you that have been tuning in every week. We'll probably we definitely will be getting a few more mock drafts in before draft night in the next month. But I think tonight we're just kind of going over a lot of these different positions, anything that we haven't touched on in the last few weeks, because now the dust has kind of settled on a lot of these free agency signings, and now a lot more formulated opinions, I think, are coming out about who we've lost, who we've gained. And, I think the big free agency episode we did a couple weeks ago was a lot of kind of initial reactions, and now we're kind of seeing, okay, how do these variables fit, all these pieces fit into the big picture for 2026?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be going through all of those positions, all of the different roster movement here tonight, breaking that down position by position. But first, Tyler, we do have a couple more free agent signings and one release to get to before we dive into all of that. So to kick things off here, we have the Patriots. The last week, they signed two more players. They added some tackle depth along the offensive line with James Hudson III, and they added some corner depth with Kindle Vildor. They also released backup quarterback Joshua Dobbs in a move that was surprising to some. So, Tyler, what are your biggest takeaways here from the latest round of free agency activity from the Patriots?
The Dobbs situation kind of stunned me. He was under contract for one more year. I know he's an NFL journeyman. Guys, I've lost track how many teams he's been on the last, I want to say close to a decade. But that was a shock for me. You and I spoke on this show that we thought Tommy DeVito was going to be out the door. And we thought the Patriots were just, kind of cut ties, move on. Oh, well, it was a cool run. Cool having you walking around the north end of Boston and going to all the Italian restaurants and whatnot and soaking up the atmosphere of the whole Italian side of New England. But he is back. And I kind of find that interesting with Dobbs, who's the QB2 being out the door, and DeVito, who, for the time being, you could loosely say he's in a QB2 position, but we'll see come time we get to training camp and through preseason how that kind of takes shape. This makes me wonder what New England wants to do with a QB3. I put up an article about a month ago of what they could potentially do. A name that I did drop and I don't have intel on this. Maybe I should have looked this up before we started recording, but a name that I did drop in that article was Jimmy Garoppolo, who I don't know if the Rams have re-signed him yet. I don't know if you know. I don't want to say anything too off the rails at this moment.
I know he generated interest from the Arizona Cardinals. Let me double check and see if he was actually officially signed by anybody, because I know that they ended up going with Gardner Minshew in free agency.
Yeah. So, I mean, while you're looking that up real quick, I'll go on my Garoppolo rant. If he happens to not have been signed with Arizona, I haven't heard anything. I kind of thought there'd be an interesting move to bring him back to Foxborough. And
yeah, he's still sitting out there as a free agent, Tyler. You're correct on that. Some interest from the Rams apparently on bringing him back. We talked about that interest with the Cardinals, but he's still on the market.
That would be, I know it's kind of an out there concept to think about, but he's used to his program. And I think he's fit into that piece before with the Patriots. And let's also not forget he was on the Raiders too. I know that wasn't really necessarily a positive experience, most likely, but the two of them know each other. What's not to say they bring him back for a QB3 or a QB2 situation this offseason, even if it's just a 1-year deal. I think Drake Maye would probably benefit from a quarterback who's been there before, who isn't looking to really be a starter. I really don't feel that way about Jimmy G at this moment, but still could be a good, QB whisperer to him as a QB3 or a QB2 or a QB3. And then again, there's also the draft. I don't know. Maybe I think you and I are both in agreement that the Patriots really don't have a lot of interest in drafting another quarterback in a 6th or 7th round, but this move is interesting just to me to get Dobbs out of there. I know, nobody really knew too much about him. He didn't have any need to have a lot of reps this season. I mean, people do know about Josh Dobbs, but again, it was just a shocker. It was just, I wasn't expecting that. I don't know about you.
Yeah, for sure. And we can absolutely start with Josh Dobbs here. Thought that backup quarterback position was locked down for him entering the 2026 season. Some ups and downs with him in the preseason in 2025, and you only saw him really in spurts, a couple of games of action there for the Pats in 2025 in the regular season there when the score was out of reach and Drake Maye exits the game. And it's not like you're looking to push the ball down the field at all at that point, but he still showed some efficiency running the offense himself when he was asked to do so for the Patriots in 2025. I think that this more so goes back to how they feel about Tommy DeVito in that backup role. And you mentioned it. We thought, he was out after the last couple of weeks when we entered the free agency discussion. He was one of those restricted free agents for the Patriots. Felt like that $3.5 million tender for him that they would have had to give him was a little bit high, and they end up re-signing him to a 2-year, $4.4 million deal, so undercut that a little bit. And Tyler, just when we thought he was out, they pulled him back in with Tommy DeVito, right? I mean, you can't write this stuff. That's how it actually went. He's the backup quarterback now. You go, hey, right? And North End Tommy returns to the North End, sticking around Foxborough for at least the next couple of seasons here. And I think that really goes to the confidence that they had in him. A lot of people that I heard from loved what they saw from DeVito in the building. So it seems like he's primed to take that number 2 quarterback role behind Drake Maye, with obviously the plan being that he doesn't really see the field all that much except for in training camp. I'm kind of still there with you on the drafting or not drafting a quarterback late discussion. I mean, we can certainly open that up more now because they only have 2 quarterbacks on the roster. But even if you go back to what they did last year, bringing in a guy like Ben Woolridge for the preseason, then cutting him at the end, he was an undrafted rookie free agent that past year. So they could go in a similar route here with the backup quarterback situation or the third quarterback situation, but that's definitely still a little bit tentative. The Patriots have shown a tendency to want to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster, having one of those emergency third guys, but I don't see them going out and spending any more big money on a backup quarterback. So it looks like DeVito for now is in that number 2 role. Quick couple of points here on Kindle Vildor as well at the corner position. A guy that I think slots in more as a core special teams player. Hasn't played all that much on the defensive side of the football. The most snaps he actually took in a season was in 2022 with the Chicago Bears. He had 822 snaps that year, so a pretty good sample size for him there. Just a 50.2 overall defensive grade with him in that larger sample size. He had one of his 2 career interceptions, the other coming this past year, actually, when he intercepted Mac Jones when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers played the San Francisco 49ers. So a little crossover of worlds there. He did play a couple of games for Vrabel in Tennessee in 2023, but a guy that slots in more as a core special teamer and somebody that could compete for that personal protector position on the punt unit in front of Bryce Behringer. And if they end up bringing in some more competition at the punter position, we'll see there. But that was the position that was mainly manned last year by Marte Mapu. He was kind of on the roster bubble going into last season, now on an expiring contract here as we enter the 2026 season. So we talked about it even last week, Tyler, with them bringing competition in at every single position, at long snapper even. So personal protector might be another one of those positions where now we have some competition and a 4th or 5th body there in the rotation in the corner room, something that was certainly needed. I know we also have James Hudson to touch on. I'll let you kind of kick things off with him.
Yeah, Hudson was – so the news broke, I believe, yesterday that the Patriots were signing James Hudson on a 1-year deal. Interesting move. He was on the Giants last year, and he kind of had quite an incident in week 2 against the Dallas Cowboys divisional game. I don't know if it was 4 consecutive penalties on a drive or if it was just 4 penalties across one drive. I can't remember that off the top of my head. But either way, I think that set like an NFL record or something. And he the nail in the coffin on that was that he got into a physical altercation on the field, which led to not to use the Gen Z terminology here, but he had quite the crash out on the sidelines after that. Brian Dable trying to calm him down. Russell Wilson over there, pretty much everybody just surrounding him, trying to be like, look, man, you got to chill out. What the heck is going on out there? But, you know, I did a piece on the news breaking on that earlier this morning, if anybody wants to check it out. But I kind of summed things up with the New England Patriots have always kind of been a salvation team for players on a 1-year deal, kind of looking to maybe say like, well, okay, that wasn't me, what you saw like a while back. I mean, they've done this for anybody from James Hudson, just for the sake of mentioning his name, or all the way up to Randy Moss. So, you know, this is a chance maybe he can come on and really prove himself. But I also think what this could be is a, you know, situation where the Patriots do need some depth at offensive line, you know, with all the movement going around with Jarrett Wilson going to center, I believe, you know, Morgan Moses being potentially being sent out to pasture after this season. Who knows? You know, he is up there in age for an offensive lineman. I think they're just trying to maybe cycle some offensive linemen into the mix on 1-year deals in the NFL draft, probably just to kind of see what sticks. So that's kind of what this, you know, acquisition felt like to me, bringing him in. He also, Vrabel's probably crossed paths with him before. He was on the Cleveland Browns in 2024. You know, I don't know the extent of that as well, but we've seen a pattern here with Vrabel kind of wrangling up some guys who's caught his attention or he's directly coached before. We'll touch on probably a few of those more, judging by our list here. So that could be something too. Maybe Vrabel saw something he liked while they were both in Cleveland. So we shall see. We'll see how things develop.
Yeah, Tyler, I think you hit the nail right on the head there. And that's been the common thread here for the Patriots, not only this offseason, but when Vrabel took over last year too. It was all the players that he had previous experience with, and that just continued over into this offseason, whether that be with Kindle Vildor in just a couple of games in 2023, James Hudson in 2024, or even a guy that we'll talk about a little bit later in Kevin Byard for a sample size of 6 years, going all the way back through his Tennessee days when he took over there in 2018. So if you've had some playing experience under Mike Vrabel or Josh McDaniels, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, there's a good chance that the New England Patriots are showing some interest in you over the course of the last 2 off seasons. For Hudson, I think that this kind of just follows in line with what we're getting with some of these most recent signings. We touched on Vildor. I think Hudson falls into this category too, where the Patriots, as we get further removed from the initial rush of free agency signings and closer to the NFL draft, they're just trying to add bodies in the room so that they don't really have to go out and draft specifically for need, right? Like, I don't think that this necessarily completely gets rid of the opportunity for the Patriots to go out and find their right tackle of the future in the first round of the draft if they want to go and do that. But it certainly does put more options on the table for them now, because you're not drafting to get a swing tackle, because otherwise the only players that you really reliably had on the roster at the tackle position were Will Campbell and Morgan Moses. Vidarian Lowe is gone in free agency. Thayer Munford is still hanging around out there. I wouldn't rule out a return still at this point for him. But otherwise, you walk into the draft, Tyler, with an obvious glaring hole at that tackle position that you feel like a more immediate need to fill that with a premier position. This isn't the guy that's going to man the right side of the offensive line for the next 10 years, but it could be a player that has playing experience at both left tackle and right tackle that could fill in as a spot starter. We saw the importance of that last year when Will Campbell did go down with an injury and Vidarian Lowe stepped in. Very serviceable job for him when he was in the lineup, got him paid over $10 million on his new money deal when he leaves Foxborough for his efforts there. But now you lack depth at that position. You have to bring in some sort of swing tackle. I think that's what we're seeing here. The Vildor signing, very similar position. Alex Austin walks out the door, and behind Gonzalez, Carlton Davis, and Marcus Jones, you're kind of looking at a lot of question marks. Yeah, you still have Charles Woods there, who was brought in at the midway point of last season. You still have a guy like Marcellus Dial on the roster, who a lot of people, it seemed like, were excited about in the preseason last year before he ended up going on the season-ending injured reserve before the final 53-man roster was unveiled. So he'll be coming back, but really not a lot of depth at corner behind those top 3 starters. So a guy like Vildor comes in and just kind of gives you another body in the room to compete on the defensive side of the football for a depth role. And again, we already touched on his special teams contributions, but reducing that need to feel like you have to go out and specifically draft for need when that may not always align with who the best player on your board is at a current point in time. Adding a tackle there allows the Patriots to look a little bit more heavily into the edge market early on, allows them to look even at a position like wide receiver a little bit earlier in the draft, because they don't have that glaring need at the tackle position. Anything else from you before we move on to how the Patriots look in 2026 as compared to 2025?
I mean, you pretty much kind of nailed it all right there. But one thing I do want to touch on is Vildor. The fact that he's got a lot of special teams expertise, I feel, or they could probably fit him into that mold, is also just a pattern that we've seen with a lot of these signings that people are probably, Patriots fans are probably going like, okay, all right, we'll go with that, I guess. And, I think that's just, if you want to be a special team superstar, I think you come to Foxborough. And I know that's nothing flashy. I know that's something, nobody really cares about. It doesn't make the headlines really that much. But, I mean, this is a place that had Matthew Slater for over a decade, that he literally became an icon and made, if all you are a special teams player in the NFL, I feel like you better go make that your thing. And I feel that if, these names don't get to the forefront of the roster, there could be an opportunity to just kind of be these standout players on punt return, kickoff return, hands team as well, that I think could benefit the Patriots, even if they're not, being named in articles written by you or me. So I like the call as well.
Yeah, I mean, the special teams call out there is a great one by you with Matthew Slater. I think that we've even seen that continue over post Bill Belichick with a guy like Brendan Schooler, who was brought in a little bit later on in the Belichick tenure as Matthew Slater was starting to wind down his career. But we saw the value placed on that by the Vrabel regime last year, even in retaining a player like that and how much they valued him, naming him a team captain for the 2025 season. So that special teams contribution role is still certainly alive and well in Foxborough. But Tyler, we do have a lot more to get to here tonight with taking a look at the roster as it currently stands with the New England Patriots. Are they better now than they were at the end of the 2025 season? That's what we're going to be looking to answer here. And we're going to be taking this from a position-by-position approach. We're not going to be diving in super deep on each one of these. We kind of want to keep this quick hitters and moving forward. And we're going to start here with the offensive line and the tight end positions. Offensive line, a position group that we've already touched on a little bit here with the signing of James Hudson III, but also another place on the roster where the Patriots made one of their bigger splashes of the offseason, twofold, by trading their starting center from last year, Garrett Bradbury, to the Chicago Bears, and then bringing in a new starting guard in Elijah Vera Tucker. It's since been confirmed that the plan as of right now is to have Elijah Vera Tucker start at the left guard position and move Jared Wilson from left guard, where he started last year, back to center, where he spent his final season at Georgia when he was in college. Tested like an athletic freak for the center position coming out of the draft last year, and maybe a more natural fit for him there. So when I take a look at the offensive line here, Tyler, I think that there's a massive upgrade made for the Patriots as far as their starting five goes, at least just by sliding Wilson back over to center. He has to play that position much differently than you would expect a guard to play. Allows him to get out into space a little bit more and reach up to the second level of the defense to start carving out those holes on explosive type runs for backs like Travion Henderson and even Ramondre Stevenson when he starts to bust one. So love that move for Wilson to center. And finding a guard like Elijah Vera Tucker to man the left side of the offensive line was a stroke of genius there for the Patriots. They got him in at a reasonable contract, under $20 million a year, much less than what they're currently paying Mike Onwenu on the roster. Of course, a little bit of a gamble on his health there. He's had 3 separate season-ending injuries in his 5-year career. But with things like your triceps, I don't think that that's something that they can kind of count on being a lingering issue moving forward. So might have signed him for some good value, and a player that when we last saw him on the field in 2024 played at a Pro Bowl caliber level and posted the lowest pressure percentage among interior offensive linemen in the NFL with a pressure rate of just 2.8%. He's a fantastic run blocker. He's a great pass blocker and falls right in line with a lot of those athletic offensive linemen that the Patriots are bringing in with Will Campbell and with Jared Wilson as they start to reshape the front in front of Drake Maye. So for me, that offensive line is definitely in the upgrade category. How you feeling here with the Patriots offensive line?
Big upgrade, and needed to be a big upgrade after what we saw in Super Bowl 60 and bits and pieces throughout the playoffs. I love the Vera Tucker signing. I know it's high risk, high reward with the injuries, but the more things have kind of unfolded. I watched a little bit of film on him over the last couple of weeks. I think when he is healthy, Drake Maye is going to love to have this guy, covering his butt. I think there's the whole he's got to stay healthy thing, but I think the Patriots did a very good, we went over this, financial business deal here by basically saying, like, look, we will give you X amount of dollars. I think he's up to it's like $250,000 per game or something. that he dresses in and goes out and plays in. And I feel like, this isn't even just talking football. This is just kind of talking any job out. Like when there's some sort of kind of transaction between employer and employee that says, we believe in you, but we know we've had these setbacks. Let's give you something to obtain. And that is stay healthy, because there's a reason why we brought you on. So stay healthy, stay motivated. And I love that deal. I know maybe there's some haters out there that think, oh, he's going to get banged up and we're going to be, X amount of $1 million in the hole. So I don't know, but I love the deal. I love that. I feel a little more confident than I did about a month ago with this offensive line. So yeah, thumbs up from me.
Yeah, and I think one more point on that one before we flip over to tight end here. I think it also gives the Patriots a little bit more long-term, some flexibility at the right guard position as well, because, look, you got a lot of big contracts coming up. That's without going out and swinging for a trade for a guy like A.J. Brown, right? But just with guys like Christian Gonzalez and Drake Maye in the building, I don't know how feasible it's going to be for them long-term to be paying two guards north of $40 million per year combined. Mike Onwenu on an expiring contract this year at a cap valuation of $25 million. So what does that look like for him after 2026? Elijah Vera-Tucker comes in, and he started the last couple of years at right guard. He started the couple of years before that at left guard. He's played both tackle positions, so really a plug-and-play player at pretty much every single offensive line position for you there if you're in a pinch and you need somebody. So at worst, he could be a great fill-in player, but he has that high upside if he can consistently stay on the field to be a lockdown piece between Will Campbell and Jared Wilson on the left side of that Patriots offensive line. Now at tight end, I think this is where things kind of hold steady a little bit more. You have Hunter Henry that leads that room. Austin Hooper goes out as he signs back with the Atlanta Falcons on a one-year deal. But the Patriots do replace that with Julian Hill as a primarily blocking tight end. And I love this move to kind of kick things off here with the tight end position, Tyler, because it's going to take some pressure off of Hunter Henry in the run game. It was something that I talked about last week in a little bit more detail when that signing was first announced, but Henry played a much higher percentage of run blocking snaps than we're used to seeing him playing here in New England. And especially as he gets a little bit later into his career, now entering his age 32 season on an expiring contract himself, you don't want him on the field as primarily a blocker as much as they had him doing in that 2025 playoff run. So bring in Julian Hill as a guy that can take the weight off of Hunter Henry's shoulders in the run game and still gives you some flexibility with an extremely deep draft class at the tight end position to go out on day 2 or day 3 of the NFL draft and find who your future kind of F tight end may be a little bit later on in the draft. Love this signing. He may be getting paid a little bit handsomely for just being a Y inline blocking tight end, but certainly somebody that's going to see the field a lot in New England. Last year, the Patriots ran 2 tight end sets almost on 50% of their offensive plays. So he's definitely somebody that's going to be out there early and often for this offense, even if it's not in a pass catching type of role.
Yeah, I like the pick too, or the signing too, I should say. Elliot Wolf basically said, I think something about untapped potential in terms of, why they went after him and whatnot. They think there's a lot of growth there. And with Hunter Henry's career really kind of being in the twilight of it, they have to take a load off of him in terms of being a blocking tight end. Going back to what you mentioned about Jarrett Wilson as a center and being able to really kind of move up the field and bulldoze, I think it's important that there's just enough of an arsenal on the field for the Patriots to help in that running game, especially around the outside as well, which I didn't think they did a bad job at last year, but it really kind of started to dwindle as the season went on. And, Drake Maye is going to have days where he can't just sling it and make some sort of insane touchdown pass on every play. That they need to establish a run game. They need to establish a physical run game. And having a blocking tight end out there, a young guy, he's 25 years old, I believe, And the Patriots have probably had a good look at him for a little while now, being that he was in the Miami Dolphins and that they saw him twice a year. And, this just, again, goes back to how Mike Vrabel just kind of sees things, whether he keeps it in his orbit, and he does a pretty good job at that. So this season, I don't know how much he saw of him on film, but I'm sure he was very much in the discussion when they knew they needed to do something with a tight end. So I like it. I know there's criticism of it being overpaid, but maybe it's just because it's not a flashy thing, a blocking tight end like a fullback or special teams thing. Like, people don't want to really kind of harp on that too much. But if New England wants to establish a good run game, and they have always thrived in double tight end sets all the time, as far back as I can remember, even when they had two tight ends really kind of as big receivers out there, they always doubled as good blockers. So I like it. I like the call.
Love that point from you on the running game and trying to do more to support Drake Maye with that. And I think that kind of leads us into our next topic here, because the last piece of the puzzle for that position here for me is at running back, or more specifically at fullback, where the Patriots bring in Reggie Gilliam to kind of be that lead blocker in the backfield for the running game and continue, like you said, to open holes up at the second and third level of the defense. You have Julian Hill as a primarily blocking tight end, bringing a brand new guard in Elijah Vera Tucker, and the last piece to that puzzle would be Reggie Gilliam, and it's a piece that's much needed in New England. We talked about that inconsistency in the run game last year for the Patriots. They ranked top 10 in overall yardage on the ground with over 2,000 rushing yards as a team, but bottom 10 in efficiency on those running plays. So they just weren't able to really rely on that part of their offensive game plan consistently. And when you have Drake Maye shouldering as much of the offensive load as he did last year, he showed you that while he's capable of doing that, it may not be the best strategy to go out and win games, especially as you reach the latter stages of the season into the postseason. You can't be one-dimensional as an offense. So again, not one of these super flashy signings, but Reggie Gilliam, what he's going to provide for the Patriots on the field in the running game, I think is a world of difference. And of course, in that running back room, you also do have a guy like Antonio Gibson going out, where he was cut as a cap casualty to save just about $4 million on the cap for the Patriots. So I think that you could have an opportunity here to look at this as a potential downgrade for the Pats in that respect, because they haven't really done anything to fill that third running back role. But I felt like last year, they dealt with injuries at that position, specifically with Ramondre Stevenson missing just about a month of the season, halfway through the year there, and really forced Travion Henderson into a more primarily lead back role. They had Terrell Jennings in the backfield. They're going to be bringing him back. They have Elijah Mitchell in the backfield that they signed to a futures contract this offseason as well. So some consistency in the backfield. I love throwing out the name Lan Larison. He's going to be coming back in the backfield as well after missing last year, being put on IR before the final 53-man roster was finalized. So not a lot of movement on the running back front except for Gibson going out and Reggie Gilliam going in. But I think the projection that you're making with Travion Henderson and his potential year 2 jump in Josh McDaniels' system, along with the addition of a real fullback in this Patriots offense, does enough to kind of give them an upgrade here at running back for the Patriots. Tyler, how you feeling about that position group?
Love the position, love the history of a fullback in New England as well. I think he's going to be a solid fit in the McDaniels' plan. I will say this also, just like us, just like Julian Hill, the Patriots have probably got a good look at him. They saw him twice last year. And I mean, it's a different story back in 2024 and 2023 maybe, but he was a very key, I feel, for Josh Allen in the red zone as well. I've always admired the Buffalo Bills offense secretly, I must say. But I'm just kind of pulling this up right now. He was ranked by PFF as the highest rated overall in run blocking for a fullback in 2025. I don't see anybody talking about that much. Now he's a New England Patriot, at least for the next 3 years. I think he's going to be a big help in the red zone. I know I've said that before in the past few episodes. I believe New England Drake Maye struggled in the red zone from time to time. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but And we saw it a little bit throughout the year. And I think he'll be a big help once they get inside the 20 and rather walk away with touchdowns rather than field goals. So I love the pick. I love, okay, maybe, I know you and I did a running back, I think in the 5th or 6th round in our last mock draft. And, maybe the Patriots will do that. I could see them doing that. But this to me also gives me a lot of confidence after what I saw in the Super Bowl. So I don't want to give away how I'm feeling with the end of how this episode's going to end, but I think have taken a good note at what embarrassed them in the Super Bowl and knew what to go after.
Yeah, definitely some self-analysis here from the Patriots with how their postseason run went. And I love that point by you about the red zone as well. I think we saw that in short yardage where it felt like, especially later on in the season, there were situations, even in the regular season, where Josh McDaniels was just lining it up on 3rd and 4th and 1 over and over and over again, running the ball because it was something that they just felt like they couldn't get over that hump. And it was like, okay, we got to beat the dead horse, to use a term that you mentioned there, on just trying to get a first down even on 3rd and 4th and short with their running game. And it was something that they weren't able to consistently rely on. Gilliam definitely helps that. On the red zone point as well, I think that's a good transition for us here to talking about the wide receiver position, because Romeo Doubs comes in at the wide receiver position. Stephon Diggs is out, and Doubs projects as a red zone threat for this Patriots offense. End zone fades, slants down near the goal line, things that they can rely on from an ex-receiver, and that's primarily what Doubs has played through this point in his career. Although it sounds like there seems to be some optimism that he could flex a little bit more and be a bigger slot receiver at 6'2", definitely profiles much different than what the Patriots are used to having at that slot receiver role. But Diggs did that as well last year, where he kind of flexed a little bit more into the slot. He took just about 50%, just over 50% of his snaps from the slot position in the Patriots offense. So almost kind of like you mentioned earlier, a 1-for-1 replacement here with Doubs going out, Diggs coming in. And I know that there's been this big argument about, okay, well, how can this be an upgrade if you don't see Doubs going for over 1,000 yards next year and having the numbers that Diggs put up in this offense last year? I think it still is going to be an upgrade for the Patriots long-term, even without Doubs putting up the numbers that Stephon Diggs put up, because it's not just about what Diggs did in 2025. It's about how is Diggs going to look in 2026? How is he going to look in 2027, 2028? And that's where Doubs is still an ascending player here in this offense. And you have more potential for growth from a player like that than what we got from Diggs. I think that what you saw from Stephon Diggs last season with the Patriots is probably the best version of Stephon Diggs that you're going to see, and then things would start to trend in the downward direction for him in Foxborough over the next couple of years. So I think that they kind of got ahead of that one. That old Bill Belichick school of thought where you'd rather cut a guy too early than too late. You replace him with a younger player. Doubs going into his age 26 season still has a lot of potential for growth in this offense, and still does, again, give you that positional versatility where he can play on the boundary, but he can also move into the slot. Tyler, how are we feeling about the wide receiver position as it currently stands here in New England? Obviously, still some more room for growth there.
As it currently stands, as I sit here and constantly refresh my phone off to the side to see if we have any breaking news on this show, obviously you and I are hinting at the A.J. Brown situation, but we don't really have anything new on that. But Doubs, I loved the call. He was in the pool of kind of wide receivers that the Patriots were looking at and needed to sign. I don't know if he was the top one in that pool, but he definitely was in the mix. And like you said, and I think I brought it up a few weeks ago, Stephon Diggs is still a great wide receiver, but the ascension is pretty much over for him. And I'm not saying he's in a decline. I think he's just going to kind of be steady a certain way for maybe a year or two. And then I don't know. We'll see how things go. He has an ACL tear behind him. And that, I've had an ACL tear before. It doesn't, I'm not a professional athlete either. Maybe I shouldn't even go down this road, but it does kind of, if you're a professional athlete, it does kind of sway things a little bit for you. and, changes your approach to the game. But Dobbs is kind of a 1-for-1 with Diggs, and he is still ascending. And I don't want to harp too much on this point, so I'm just going to say something quick and then move off of it. But a lot of these picks, because I kind of want to sum it up more at the end of the show here, but a lot of these picks to me felt like, okay, and you touched on it too, like what are they going to be in 3 or 4 years? How are they going to be after next season in 2027? And I love forward thinking. I love when coaches and GMs do that. Like, okay, I'm going to sign this guy for 3 years. And I know maybe in the first year he's going to be good, but is he going to be great? And can we get him to greatness in his second or his third year on his contract? And that's what I felt with Dobbs. Younger style of play. I'll throw this stat out here that I just found. He has converted 75% of his catches into first downs. So if you're a Patriots fan, you better love to hear that. Like that's just something good to see. He can get the ball moving down the field for Drake Maye, even if it's just a quick, 10 and out or something in terms of yardage. I just love it. And, touched on the red zone. He's great in the red zone. Again, another big help to have a receiver in a kind of tight area of the field to make a big catch for Maye and put some touchdowns on the board rather than kicking a field goal. But yeah, ascension with him. I feel like the Patriots are kind of looking at a lot of these free agent signings and potentially even the draft and go like, okay, what if we were to not get to the Super Bowl next year? Maybe still have like a 12-win season. But let's say we don't win the AFC Championship or something like that. I'm not going to say they don't make the playoffs. I still think this team makes the playoffs next year. But, okay, we don't get to the Super Bowl, but can we get these players to a level in 2 years where we can get back to the Super Bowl and win it? Or if they do it in a year, fine, so be it. But yeah, I don't want to harp too much on that. But Dobbs is a great acquisition. 4 years, saved a bit of money too against the cap with bringing him in. So I thought it was a solid move.
Yeah, so for me, I think slight uptick in the wide receiver room, but really the jury is still out on this one. You mentioned the A.J. Brown thing. I'll touch on it a little bit more. We're not going to spend a whole bunch of time on A.J. Brown here tonight because it feels like we could have an episode on A.J. Brown potentially coming to the Patriots every single week here until, if it happens or if it doesn't happen, until we get a final decision on that. But I went on a big A.J. Brown rant last week. If you guys missed that, go check out our mock draft 2.0. But I will say that my position has since evolved a little bit here with A.J. Brown. Last week, I took the stance that it feels like, contrary to national speculation, A.J. Brown could be a New England Patriot before the NFL draft because as time continues to go on, Philadelphia only continues to lose leverage. And you know what? I'm here to tell you tonight, Tyler, if they want to continue to play that game and drag this thing out until June 1st or past June 1st, so be it. That's ultimately going to be better for the New England Patriots to not give up their first round pick, to not give up another mid-round pick to go out and acquire A.J. Brown. Rather, give up some 2027 assets, draft those players that you want to add to the roster in 2026, and then still on top of everything, add a player like A.J. Brown. That to me sounds like the sweetest deal of all. I know that people are talking about this 2027 NFL draft as being the stuff of legends. That is all projection, folks. I mean, from pick 1 to pick 257 of the NFL draft, you don't know if these guys are going to actually hit or not. It might be a little bit more so a sure thing at the top of the draft, but we see top 5 picks flame out on a consistent basis every single year. And by the time you get lower and lower in the draft, those hit rates just become so much more minuscule. By the time you reach the 6th round, the average hit rate on a draft pick is 8%. So I don't hold on to these draft picks, and we love talking about them this time of year, but I don't hold them to such a high standard that some people around this time of year especially are going to lead you to believe that these teams do. A draft pick is a draft pick. What A.J. Brown gives you as a proven player in the NFL is something much more valuable than that. So if the Patriots can wait until June 1st, they can still use that first-round draft pick. They can still use all those mid-round picks and potentially still keep all those guys on the roster and add A.J. Brown. That's the camp that I'm in. And if that's the case, then we are ascending way higher than just a small uptick in that wide receiver room for the Patriots. Tyler, anything on that before we flip sides of the ball to defense?
No, I mean, I'm pretty in agreement on there. They can Eagles can sit there and wait all they want. I don't think the Patriots are going anywhere. Again, I harped on this last week too. Like, I don't, all these teams have come in the orbit of the A.J. Brown trade. The Rams were in it for like 36 hours. The Bills at one point before they brought in Moore were in conversation. That would have stung if he went to Buffalo. Oh my God. So I don't. Mike Vrabel and Elliott Wolf are still right there looking at the Eagles front office going like, we doing this or not? So that's all I really have to say on AJ Brown. I'm almost tired of writing about the guy, so hitting refresh on seeing if there's any news that I should write about for the site. But we'll see what happens. But, there's nothing, I think the Patriots are in a win-win situation. Yeah, maybe we don't get AJ Brown. Let's just say that, and it's just going to turn into, I think, a bit of a dumpster fire if the Eagles keep him around. So I don't know, but they're still Patriots are still right there, just looking at him like, come on, let's go. Let's do this. So yeah, if you want to wait till June 1st, fine. We're still going to be here.
Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't matter when he walks in the door, he's going to be a major upgrade for that offense. All right, so we're going to flip things over to the defensive side of the football right now and talk about the trenches again, the front seven of the defense with the defensive line and the linebackers. And for me, Tyler, this is the one position where it feels like the Patriots may have lost just a little bit more than they added, but there's still some projection for some of their younger players to take on some larger roles in this position group. So just kind of going through who's in, who's out. The players exiting on that Patriots defensive front were Calebon Chason, Kyrus Tonga, which I felt like was one of the bigger underrated losses that they had on the interior of the defensive line, and then two linebackers off the ball in Jelani Tavai and Jack Gibbons. They end up adding Draymond Jones at the edge. They haven't really done anything on the interior of the defensive line. And then they added one off-ball linebacker back in KJ Britt. How are we feeling about this front seven of the defense and where it currently stands as compared to the end of the 2025 season?
Yeah, I'm not as hyped right now on the defensive side of the ball, but Kevin Byard to me is probably the only real kind of sign of hope. I don't want to say sign of hope. I'm sorry, but just kind of something that I'm like, okay, him being a Mike Vrabel guy, and if Vrabel brings in a guy that he's had a familiar relationship with, and they already have a kinship, hence back to AJ Brown. But anyway, Byard and the two of them, I feel like that's going to make for a great duo with him being such a defensive mind and getting a guy who's played for him, who's played pretty lights out football, in my opinion, especially last year in Chicago, leading the league in interceptions. And when I think of Byard as a player on the Patriots, even though it's only a 1-year deal, he's a veteran. I just feel echoes of like the situation with Rodney Harrison. I feel like he's going to come in there, and I get it, Harrison was a free safety, but he's going to kind of come in there and probably take a good leadership role in that defense, even if it's just for a year again. Just because I think he knows Vrabel's mindset and what he kind of wants to see out of his players out there, and just the experience he has. This was probably one of the best defensive moves I've saw in free agency for the Patriots. In terms of our losses, though, just such a bum. Jalen Hawkins being the safety that's now out the door, but I understand, I think what it was is what the Ravens offered the Patriots couldn't. He went to the Ravens, right? It was the Ravens.
Yeah.
What the Ravens offered the Patriots couldn't match or something. It's a shame to kind of see that, because I remember that I was just scrolling through Twitter waiting to see what was going on. And Jalen Hawkins was, I feel like, doing press on every media outlet saying how much he loved playing for Mike Vrabel. And it almost kind of seemed like, does he know something we don't know? So seeing him go was kind of a stinker. I'm a little nervous about kind of everything else in terms of the edge. Chason, I thought, was a done deal. Seeing him go pretty much for it felt like a lateral move to the Commanders. Draymond Jones coming in does bring a physicality to I know I've touched on this, a physicality to the edge. I don't think he brings the speed that maybe I would hope for. And I don't know, but I think the Patriots could get stronger at this with seeing who they draft. You and I last week, I think we went with the edge in the second round. So I think this is something that's going to take shape, but I just feel like I am a little more bummed out on the defensive side of the ball. I don't know about you, but you can have the floor on that.
Yeah, I think it's close, especially when you look at the front seven. We mentioned there's more going out than is coming in. But I think a lot of people are forgetting, especially with the interior of the defensive line, just the impact that a guy like Corey Durden had on the interior of that defensive line in the postseason run. He was one of PFF's highest graded defensive tackles for the Patriots playoff run there. And that was with Khyiris Tonga on the field. So I think that for the Pats, it was finding a guy late in the season that overperformed expectations and that you want to bank on at a little bit lower of a valuation than what Khyiris Tonga went out and got paid on the market. He had a 3-year, $21 million deal from the Kansas City Chiefs to go out and leave the Patriots. So you have a guy like Corey Durden on a much cheaper contract for this upcoming season. And even a guy like Joshua Farmer, who the Patriots just spent a mid-round pick on in last year's draft, that showed signs of promise early on in the season. He ended up getting injured and shelved on injured reserve for the rest of the year. But you're anticipating him coming back, getting a little bit better, and eating up some more snaps on that interior rotation behind your two premier starters in Milton Williams and Christian Barmore. So it's a position that they already had a lot of depth at, and I feel like when you're projecting the growth for these younger players, which is going to be a big thing for this Patriots team as we enter year 2 of the Mike Vrabel era. They had 11 draft picks last year, and it seems like they hit on way more of those guys than they missed on. They're going to want to see those guys continue to grow within the offense or the defense in this case. So we talked about that a little bit at running back with Travion Henderson. I will bring that discussion back up here at defensive tackle with a guy like Joshua Farmer, who I feel like nobody is talking about at this point in time, but still projects to be a key rotational piece for that Patriots defensive line. The one area where I feel like they could definitely add more here is at the edge. K'Lavon Chaisson goes out. Anthony Jennings also goes out, and that felt like a player that it was a matter of time before he left Foxborough, but I felt carved a really nice role out for himself post-trade deadline last year where he was kind of in the rotation. And we talked about last week K'Lavon Chaisson not bringing a whole lot in the running game for the Patriots, more of a pass rush specialist for that defense. But on those early downs where it felt like the opposing team was going to be running the football and the Patriots knew that, Anthony Jennings on the edge there did a fantastic job for New England. He goes out, and Draymond Jones comes in with a little mix of both of those. He also has some interior, exterior versatility. He plays somewhere between 265 and 280, but has shown that ability to flex on the inside or outside of the defensive line. He gives you some pass rush, some ability to defend the run, a little bit more than what you saw with a guy like K'Lavon Chaisson on the Patriots defensive line last year. So a good signing there, but still an area where I think we both feel like the Patriots could add some more premier talent with an early day 1 or day 2 pick in the NFL draft at the edge. So I'll touch a little bit more on the defensive backs here. I know you talked about Kevin Byard. For me, Tyler, that was my favorite signing by the Patriots of this offseason cycle. I love that. And he actually did sign for a higher average annual value with the Patriots than a guy like Jalen Hawkins did. Hawkins signed with the Ravens at $6 million per year, had that extra year tacked on to the end of the deal there with a 2-year, $12 million deal with the Baltimore Ravens. The Byard deal, only 1 year for the Patriots, but he signs at $9 million for that 1 year. But I think what he brings for that defense, and a lot of what you touched on with his veteran leadership, he was a 6-time team captain, both in Tennessee and his 2 years in Chicago. He was a 2-time team captain. So definitely bringing some vocal leadership there for the defense, but also his ability to take away the football. You mentioned he led the NFL in interceptions last season. He leads the NFL in interceptions since he entered the league in 2016 with 36 interceptions for him in his career. That's actually second most among all active NFL players right now, trailing only Harrison Smith with 39 interceptions. So he's got a nose for the football. He goes out and seeks that. He knows where to be, when to be there, and he's going to help all of those players on the defensive side of the football get to that spot as well with a plethora of experience in this Vrabel scheme. He played for him for 6 years of his NFL career. So just my favorite signing here for the Patriots, a 3-time first-team All-Pro, including last year in 2025. So, yeah, he might not be the player that he once was in terms of a man-to-man coverage player stepping down into the box, but it hasn't really seemed to affect his game all that much. He averages about 100 tackles per season, Tyler, coming down from the third level of the defense. Just 2 years ago, he set a career high with 130 tackles. That led the Chicago Bears in his first year there. In his second year last year, he still hit 93 tackles, which was second most on the team. So that, I think, is probably the biggest area of difference between he and Hawkins. Hawkins averages just about half of that, just about 50 tackles per season for him underneath that through this point in his 6-year career, and also posts a missed tackle percentage of 15% as opposed to Byard's 7% missed tackle percentage in his career. So I think that you're getting just about, statistically at least, twice the player at just about $3 million more in cost, bringing Kevin Byard in. But a fantastic signing, my favorite for the Patriots here this offseason. So in that defensive back room, a definite arrow up for the Patriots. How we feeling there overall in that Patriots defensive back room?
I think we're feeling great. I think we're just patiently waiting on, we don't have to touch on this because we have no news on this, but I'm just patiently waiting on the Christian Gonzalez extension news. So, but yeah, Byard is a solid pickup. My bad. I thought it was defense as a whole. I touched on defensive backs first and not the defensive line and everything and edge. But regardless, I think, I like Byard in terms of I think they got a veteran player with better stats than a younger guy with half the stats, like you'd kind of mentioned. And I think that's just kind of, again, the 1-for-1 situation. Like, okay, we got to get this guy out of town. but we can get this guy too. And yes, there might be this little thing that we kind of we don't want to harp on, but the press is going to harp on. But I think he's going to fit into the system really well. I could see him, even after this season, probably coming back, cap off his career with the Patriots if everything just turns out to be a success. But yeah, probably the best defensive signing that we've seen so far this offseason for the Patriots. As I sit here and talk to you and all of you listening and watching, I don't think the Patriots are in Max Crosby sweepstakes right now. But I think they would want that to take shape organically. So just to go back to the edge again, real quick, I think that might be something they look at in the draft. Definitely second round. I may be bleeding into the third round, but I don't know. But so again, I think this is a solid unit, offense and defense, even though I kind of think there's a little bit more success offensively to assist Drake Maye.
Yeah, so we entered the offseason and it was all a talk about the Patriots retaining their unrestricted free agents, and that didn't really happen at all, Tyler. We saw a lot of those guys go out, most new guys coming into the building, but like we mentioned earlier, some players with familiarity with Mike Vrabel at some point in the past. So all of this kind of leads us back to our main question, our premise for this episode. Are the Patriots better now than they were at the end of the 2025 season? Your overall thoughts here?
Well, this is the question that I think come October, November, if this turns into a train wreck, everybody's going to come back and visit this episode and hop in the comments and go, this just didn't age well. But so far, our little fan base hasn't really been that mean to us. But
so far,
we seem like nice guys. Come on now. But I was kind of trying to avoid touching on this earlier, but I think I went a little too hard with what I want to say to cap off the show here. But I'm going to go on a limb here and say yes, because if I look back at, kind of the 2025 Patriots as much as a fun team it was to watch, I mean, they just came out of nowhere. And, you and I starting this show, did we think we were going to be covering the Super Bowl? Like, no. I mean, maybe we probably did, but I think we also had to be very realistic. But I just have this kind of gut feeling that, Mike Vrabel and Elliott Wolf sat down and went like, that was a great team, but we potentially could plateau with that team. And I think they took a good look at the areas where they were going to plateau. And the obvious key one was the big one that made a lot of buzz was Stephon Diggs. And, rightfully, I mean, that was also maybe financially too. They didn't want to pay him that amount of money. But I look at a lot of what has come in. And if you really break down the science of football and what teams are looking for that aren't really looking for glitz and glam and all these hot free agents and all these big names are requesting trades out of god awful teams, I think they've really bumped up for the most part. They've bumped up a lot at their positions that they needed right now. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes. They are looking to ascend in 2026, and that is even if they don't make the Super Bowl next year. I touched on this a little bit earlier. Like they signed players that kind of went, okay, even if we don't get to the Super Bowl, can they get us there in 2027 because they stepped up a little bit? Can they do it in 2028? And I kind of think that's what they were looking at. Like, let's look at a lot of these guys long term, because some of these guys we brought in long term, it's going to run out of steam pretty soon. So I will, just to sum it up, say yes. I think they are better now. I'm ready for all the smoke that comes in, let's say, 6 months. If we happen to be wrong and we're sitting here wondering why the Patriots are 1-6, but I really don't see that happening with this team, despite a schedule being a lot more difficult. I still think they're going to compete. I have some hot takes in my back pocket about this team that we can save for another episode when we're out of ideas in the dog days of summer.
It's coming soon.
It's coming soon. This show might go off the rails a little bit, but I do think they are better right now as I sit here and talk to you than they were 2-3 months ago.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that even when we break this down position by position like we did, most of these groups, you had at least a little bit of an up arrow, and we're only halfway through the offseason acquisition period. Look at what the Patriots did with their 11 picks in the 2025 draft. Now they enter the 2026 draft with 11 picks and no real glaring holes on the roster. I think we feel a lot better about the depth on this team than we once did, and there's only more opportunity to continue adding to that. Now, I think to your point, Tyler, this team could be a lot better on paper, and they're still not going to finish with a 14-3 record to end the regular season this upcoming year. They're playing a much better schedule. That's one of the things that you have to deal with when you win the division, and they haven't had to deal with that for the last few years. So first world problems here, but they're also playing the AFC West. They're playing the NFC North, so definitely a much more difficult schedule for all of those people out there. And you guys in the comments section that love to talk about the schedule that the Patriots played, it's a much more difficult one this upcoming season. So definitely going to be a little bit better for that kind of measuring stick where they're at right now in this point of building the Vrabel regime. But I don't think anybody expected them to make as deep a playoff push as they did this past season. So certainly already ahead of schedule. I don't think that they did anything to take steps backward from that. This is the business of the NFL in the offseason. You're going to have players going out. You're going to have players coming in. I think for every loss that they had somewhat of an equal addition. And we weren't looking at guys like Calebon Chason and Kyrus Tonga at this point last offseason as these massive upgrades on the roster. They came in on short deals, obviously, but for extremely low money. Kyrus Tonga was making less than $3 million on his contract last year with the Patriots. So what they got from him was all bonus. And you're going to project some of these players to do the same in not only 2026, but beyond that for this team as they move ahead in further and further into the Vrabel era and that Drake Maye kind of regime here in Foxborough. So for me, again, another maybe not a huge upward arrow for this team, but definitely still an improvement on where they were at the end of the 2025 season, with the NFL draft still to come. So my last question to you here, Tyler, before we officially wrap things up for this episode is, we've taken a look at the roster where they've added, where they haven't done enough to add, and where do we feel like they could still make some improvements as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft? What's one position that you feel like they need to walk out of the draft absolutely nailing?
I'll go back to our last mock draft. I really think it's the edge. Like, let's bring a pretty impressive edge rusher in out of the draft in a few weeks. Because I said, I think that Max Crosby thing, even if it ever was anything, is off the table for New England. So I don't know. I would say edge rusher in the second round, because I think we're going to trade a first round pick to Philadelphia. Anyway, yeah, I would say edge rusher. If not edge rusher, I think after what we did last week in the third round, we said a cornerback. So it's definitely going to be a defensive player. But as I sit here today, I say edge rusher.
I love the pick, and I would absolutely agree with you 100% on that. I'll give you a different one just for the sake of being different here, but I think edge is that clear top need for this team at this point. And if they do end up retaining that first round pick, I could absolutely see them using it on an edge rusher, because that's a position that you need a more immediate contributor at, right? Like we talked about in our mock draft 1.0, potentially drafting a tackle and then shelving that player for a year, see what happens with Morgan Moses after this season, and having a franchise right tackle that you can pair on the other side of the line of scrimmage with Will Campbell. I think if this team is in win now mode and you still have an A.J. Brown trade on the table, maybe there is that handshake deal like you mentioned last week, and you know that's going to happen post June 1st. You want to grab a guy that can be an immediate contributor on the defense. I think edge is that clear number one need. But to give you another position here, how about off-ball linebacker? When we were talking about the defensive front seven, you talk about a guy like Jack Gibbons exiting. You talk about a guy like Jelani Tavai exiting. And the only real addition that they have to that room is KJ Britt right now, not to mention that Robert Spillane is now on the wrong side of 30, and he just dealt with injuries at the tail end of this past season that kept him off the field. And he was fighting to be on the field in that playoff run, probably wasn't 100% when he was out there. And your other premier off-ball linebacker would be Christian Ellis at this point, and he's definitely not one of these guys that's at the top of the league. He's on an expiring contract this season after signing a 2-year extension with the Patriots. He almost went to the Raiders last offseason, but the Patriots matched that contract. So you have a guy that's 30 plus, and you have a guy that's on a 1-year deal right now, and then a core special teams player backing them up in that off-ball linebacker room right now. So I could absolutely see them with one of their mid-round picks going out and grabbing another off-ball linebacker to shore up their depth for this year, but then project to being a long-term starter beyond 2026. So off-ball linebacker would be the one position that I would add there. Tyler, any thoughts before we wrap up the show here? I'm going to kind of lead us out here after we go here.
No, I like the pick too. I could see an off-ball linebacker. I mean, I didn't even take those contracts into consideration. I didn't even know he was going to the Raiders next year. Oh my God. Or last year, I mean. So, you know, I really think the defensive side of the ball is something we're going to probably see in the first couple rounds of the draft. come next month. But then again, you and I can have some fun in our mock drafts, and to hell with it. Why don't we pick a wide receiver in the second round? or who knows? I don't know. So, I mean, that's something we can probably have some fun with in the coming weeks. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely feels like it's going to be defensive heavy, but we can explore all of those different avenues with more mock drafts to come. We're planning on doing a mock draft 3.0 coming up really soon here. So definitely stay tuned for that. And guys, if this is your first touch point with us, we'd like to thank you for being here and for staying all the way to the end. For more from us on the Patriots, head over to the Roundtable website at roundtable.io. And if you're enjoying what we're doing here on a weekly basis, rather, the best way that you guys can support us is by heading over to the Patriots Roundtable website and joining as a member there. It's fast, it's easy, and it's completely free. And your membership allows you to join the discussion directly with us. We're trying to build a fantastic community of sports fans over on the site, and your membership would greatly help us with that. So please head over to the Roundtable website at roundtable.io by using the link in our description below. And tell us what you think. Where have the Patriots gotten better? Where do they still need to improve? Who do you want them to draft on draft night? We're willing to entertain all of those different comments and questions there. So let us know in the comments section below or over on the community boards at the Roundtable website. Guys, we look forward to seeing you there. Alongside Tyler Geis, I'm Eddie Murata, and we are signing off until next time.